We know the Chicago Bears got better at some key positions, but on the show today, I want to take a closer look at how those positional improvements will have a broader impact on the growth of the offense and the defense in specific areas.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And of course, hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we really appreciate our everydayers joining us 5 days a week for your daily Bears fix. On the show today, I want to look at the specific areas the Chicago Bears have improved this offseason, not specifically just on the wide receiver core got better or the linebacking core got better. Yeah, we know the positions that got better, but more so how that translates to the broader team and how the improvements at wide receiver and on the offensive line improve things, specific aspects of the passing game, in particular areas where the Bears struggled last season that now should be a lot better as a result of the improvements they've made. That includes the run defense from the front seven, even as we might still have questions about this pass rush, and also the run blocking of the offensive line. I think that group got even better in that area, even if we might still have some questions about pass protection, but also I think we can have some questions about who exactly that falls on specifically for this offensive line. But what kind of brought this topic together for me was something I saw on Twitter from friend of the show, Jonathan Wood, at Jonathan_Wood1, who tweeted the crazy Bears stat of the day. Dante Pettis led the team in third and fourth down targets last year with 21. He turned those 21 targets into 2 first downs. And Jonathan followed up by saying, yeah, I'm really looking forward to Chicago fielding an actual NFL caliber group of pass catchers this year. That is a truly crazy Bears stat of the day. And I appreciate Jonathan for finding it and sharing it on Twitter and us borrowing it here and giving him, of course, all due credit there, because that is an insane stat. On third and fourth downs, the player who saw most passes thrown in was Dante Pettis, and he only was able to take 2 of those and convert those into first downs. That's a very clear and obvious area that was a weakness for the Bears, converting some of those third and fourth down situations that should be so much more improved with DJ Moore coming in as the new number 1 wide receiver, and also with Chase Claypool having now an actual offseason in this offense with Justin Fields to get on the same page with everyone else. But it expands beyond that, right? I think about somebody like DJ Moore being able to come in and just be a playmaker in a lot of different areas, including on third and fourth down. When Justin Fields will know, okay, it's third down. Where's my guy that I just know I can trust? He's going to find a way to get open more often than not. Mooney sometimes has, but not quite to the consistency that a guy like DJ Moore has. And of course, Mooney was hurt for some of last season as well. Still hurt right now, not participating in OTA. So he wasn't always there to even be a go-to third down option, which is how you get Dante Pettis somehow leading the offense in third and fourth down targets there. Mooney or Moore can be that go-to option in those situations. That he can be a guy that can take a pass that might have been short of the first down marker and turn it into a first down. Whereas last year, it felt like the Bears didn't have guys who could make plays after the catch. Like last season for Carolina, it was a little bit of a down year for DJ Moore after the catch, but he still had 9 missed tackles after the catch individually. The Chicago Bears wide receiving core in total had 9 missed tackles after the catch between Claypool, Mooney, Pettis, Equanimeous St. Brown, Velus Jones, etc. They had 3 different receivers with 3 missed tackles after the catch. That was it. DJ Moore by himself had as many as the entire Bears wide receiving core did last season. It was a little bit of a down year for DJ Moore in terms of yards after catch and missed tackles broken. So clearly there's an immediate area where not even on third and fourth downs, but just in general, DJ Moore can take the throws that Justin Fields makes and create even more production out of them than the receivers that were there last season, even if it was the exact same throw to the exact same spot, but just a more effective dynamic weapon on the receiving end of those balls. But also, I think more broadly in terms of how this offense operated, so often it felt like the Bears were living and dying a little bit on Fields' deep ball because receivers weren't able to make as many types of plays after the catch. So the short and intermediate game was a lot of just like catching and almost immediate tackle type dink and dunk when they were able to go to it. It wasn't like you could have a short dump off often become a big time play, despite the Bears running the second highest rate of screen passes for any quarterback in the NFL last season to Fields. Number one on that list, Aaron Rodgers, funny enough. But same coaching tree, same offensive system, that makes sense. But the Bears didn't have guys that could really make plays after the catch that well on the screen pass. Again, Mooney could do it, but when you're throwing screens to Equanimeous St. Brown or Chase Claypool or Dante Pettis, you weren't necessarily getting dynamic guys after the catch. But you can add Tyler Scott into that mix this year as well, plus DJ Moore, and plus hopefully a healthy Darnell Mooney by the time training camp and stuff rolls around. And there's a lot more opportunity for those plays to make Justin Fields' job easier. And that's how you start to see this supporting cast start to rise. But also just that DJ Moore can win at all three areas of the field, short, intermediate, and deep. Particularly, I think he can be a big boost in the short and intermediate areas where that's where Fields struggled a little bit last year in terms of timing and getting the ball out quickly and accurately to those sort of like, 15 and under type yards downfield passing in the air. At times the rhythm was not there. And I think some of that is on Fields to speed up his footwork and really get through to that and fire that on time. But also the receivers have to be through their routes on time and have to be open when Fields goes to look for them. And having better receivers should then improve that ability to hit those other areas of the field a little bit more effectively. And all of it accumulates in trying to undo what was a crazy Bear stat of the day yesterday from our friend Jonathan Wood on Twitter. But it had me thinking like, okay, there's a clear area where the improvements the Bears made this offseason should take what was a weak spot and definitely, if not make it a strength, at least make it not so glaring of a weak spot. And you look at where they made some of the other improvements on this roster, and you can see a clear path to improvement, particularly when it comes to run defense. That was a sore spot for this team last year, but also I think run blocking on the offensive line, that wasn't so much a weakness, but definitely got better this year, even if we still have questions when it comes to pass rush and pass protection. That's next on Locked On Bears. Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar, the makers of the world's best tasting protein bars. Because Built Bars don't taste like a lot of other protein bars. They're sometimes kind of hard or chalky and just kind of like doesn't taste very good, but you think it's good for you, so you got to just scarf it down. Built Bars are delicious. They taste like candy bars. I eat one literally every single day. They're soft, they're easy to chew, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, but they're also good for you. They're low sugar, low calories, high fiber, high protein. We're talking 17 grams of protein for just 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar. It is an unbeatable combination, and that's why I love them and eat them all the time. You can check out all their amazing flavors at built.com, or you can get them even faster in person at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. You can go into Walmart and get a 4-bar box of their double chocolate bars, their cookies and cream bars, or their coconut puffs. And if you live near a Sam's Club, you get a full 13-bar box of 2 of my favorite flavors. The coconut puffs and the brownie batter puffs as well are so great. You got to taste them for yourself because tasting is believing. And trust me, you'll thank me later. We know the Bears so often struggled to stop the run last season. It was part of, a wide range of issues on defense. The defense in general was very poor. The pass rush was a problem. The run defense was a problem. Coverage was at times a problem. Top to bottom, this defense needed improvement. And certainly that was a big emphasis in free agency with 2 big signings at the linebacker spot. And then, of course, in the draft, 2, 3, your second and third round picks all on defense, 2 on the defensive line, and then 1 in the secondary. Use another 5th round pick in the secondary. There was a big emphasis on trying to improve this Bears defense. And while pass rush remains, I think, pretty clearly the biggest weakness, the defensive line in general, I think, is the biggest weakness on this Bears team that remains, but specifically in the pass rush department, I think there's reason to believe the run defense should be better. Will it be fixed? Will it be top 5 run D in the NFL? No, we're not there yet with this defensive line, but it should be a lot more improved. I mean, we know the Bears were, I think, 27th in yards per carry allowed and 31st in total rushing yards and 32nd. They gave up the most rushing touchdowns of any team in the NFL. And a good chunk of that starts and can be blamed on the defensive line last season. Certainly trading away the likes of Robert Quinn during the year certainly didn't help. And then some of the guys they were trying to rely on for more snaps last season did not play particularly well in the running game. There was a constant rotation of the nose tackle position. Angelo Blackson was pretty terrible in that regard. Armon Watts was okay, but he's not as stout as like a full-time nose tackle. He's more of a three technique that they play at nose tackle. They played Justin Jones at nose tackle sometimes, and that was a similar issue. Mike Pennell getting in there as well is kind of just a journeyman guy in the NFL. And then, boy, Al-Qadim Muhammad trying to stop the run at defensive end. That was messy. It was messy a lot of times. And even Travis Gibson last season was not that great and needs to be better in terms of the running game. But you come in and you have, I think, Andrew Billings at nose tackle is an underrated acquisition for this reason in particular. He's not going to be a 7 to 10 sack guy. He might not even be a 5 sack guy from the nose tackle position. He'll get 1 or 2 perhaps over the course of the season. And so, big run stopping nose tackles are not sexy, exciting signings that everybody gets fired up about. He's on a 1-year deal, but he's always been a really solid, just people mover, a guy who's going to take up a bunch of space on the interior as a 320-pound guy who can just be big and strong. And yeah, he missed a few tackles last season, but he's good at getting opportunities of not only just occupying a double team, but also shedding one-on-one blocks in the running game and getting to the ball carrier, even if sometimes he missed a few more tackles there last season. At least he's getting there. And then even if he's missing the tackle, he's slowing down the ball carrier so that teammates, like linebackers especially, can flow over the top and make some more of those types of plays in run defense and be disruptive, even if he's not necessarily always finishing that play. Because you're not going to get an elite, like disruptive finishing nose tackle for a 1-year deal, cheap, late in free agency. Those kind of guys get franchise tags like Deron Payne or long-term contract extensions, I should say, like guys like Deron Payne. But even at defensive end, DeMarcus Walker comes over from the Tennessee Titans. He too was pretty darn solid in the running game, played a lot of the 3 technique interior defensive tackle spot and could collapse some of those plays, bounce them outside and make it easier for the Tennessee Titans linebackers to be able to come over and make those plays. And, your 2 defensive rookies that you drafted, Zach Pickens and Javon Dexter, both bigger, stouter defensive tackles who I think were more productive in the running game than in the passing game in terms of the pass rush, and the sack numbers were not necessarily fully there, but they were impactful in the running game. And we don't have, there's not like the equivalent of sacks. There's run stops by PFF measures, but there's a lot that goes into run stops as well. But those guys should be better rotational players in terms of run defense than we saw last season from the likes of Angelo Blackson on this defensive line. Then you add in the big money that the Bears spent at linebacker, and you start to put together a formula here for a better run defense in Chicago this season. That you look at last season, again, missed tackles is not the end-all be-all for how good individual players were in the running game, but Nick Morrow was one of the leaders in the NFL in missed tackles in the running game. He missed 13 tackles in run defense last season. Only 2 players had more. They both were tied at 14. So he's 1 missed tackle away from the NFL lead among linebackers in missed tackles in the running game last season. Then, the guys who played like half seasons, Roquan Smith had 6 missed tackles in the run game last season. Jack Sanborn had 6 missed tackles in the run game last season. Joe Thomas had 7 last season. So like between those guys, the quick math says that's 32 among those 4 linebackers just in run defense. That doesn't include missed tackles after the catch in the passing game as well. You replace that with Tremaine Edmonds, who missed 3 tackles in run defense all year last season. When he gets to the ball carrier, he brings him down more consistently than any of the Bears linebackers did last year. TJ Edwards missed 8. That's, but for a full season, comparatively, like Nick Morrow missed 13 for a full season, Edwards missed 8. Or for half a season, Joe Thomas missed 7 and Edwards missed 8 for a whole season. So if you sort of extrapolate it out over 16 games on a missed tackle rate, Edwards is definitely a bit lower than everything we saw from Bears linebackers, even if it's not as drastically impressive as what we saw from Tremaine Edmonds. But like those guys should be able to tackle better in the running game. And if the defensive line led by Billings at nose tackle, but also the other interior defensive tackle additions and maybe DeMarcus Walker, if they can occupy the offensive line blocks a little longer and free up better lanes for Edmonds and Edwards to make those plays, all of a sudden your front 7 is in a much better position to be a better run stopping team. You're going to need your safeties and your cornerbacks to be a part of that equation as well. Like Jaquan Brisker, one of his few downside last seasons, he missed a lot of tackles, particularly in the running game as well. You need him to be better in that area. It can't all be on this front 7, but it feels like while there's still very legitimate concerns about the pass rush, there's a lot of reason to think this run defense, as long as everyone stays healthy at this point, should be able to be a much improved unit and not be such a giant weakness for this team and we can focus all our concern on the pass rush there instead. But we have talked quite a bit about the pass rush concerns and the options still available in free agency via trade, as Ryan Poles has thrown out there. Listen back to those previous podcasts if you want more on the pass rush. But I also want to look at the running game on the other side of the ball, where certainly was not a weakness last season, but it does feel like the offensive line got better in the running game, even if in a similar vein, we might still have some questions about pass protection, but still the offensive line improved as a whole. And I want to look at specifically how that might reverberate through the rest of the offense next on Locked On Bears. Darnell Wright and Nate Davis form the new right side of this Chicago Bears offensive line. Tevin Jenkins moving over to left guard as it stands right now, although Nate Davis hasn't been at Bears OTAs yet. But regardless, Wright in for Riley Reif, Davis in for Tevin Jenkins, who moves over to left guard. And really what happens here is Nate Davis is in for Sam Mustipher. That's the net change, right? Is Mustipher's out of the lineup, Nate Davis is in, not at the same position, but as a result of Nate Davis coming in, Mustipher is the one who ends up getting bumped out of the lineup, just as Darnell Wright comes in and would bump Riley Reif out of the lineup. And both Reif and Nate Davis were better run blockers in their previous spot than pass protectors. Not to say that they're both equal in both the same level of run blocking, the same level of pass protection, but just that's what a little bit more of what they're known for. Plus, Sam Mustipher was not the world's best run blocker and not the world's best pass blocker either. A lot of weaknesses there, perhaps the weak link on this Bears offensive line. And you feel like this can be one of the better run blocking groups in the NFL. That's what we heard last week on Friday's podcast when we had Joe Marino on from Locked On NFL Scouting. He did a deep dive on this Bears team from last year and the acquisitions this offseason. He said, they got some people movers on this offensive line. We talked about it with him. This could be one of the better run blocking groups in the NFL, for Dante Foreman behind them, for Khalil Herbert behind them, Roshan Johnson behind them, and of course, Justin Fields, whenever he is a ball carrier running behind this offensive line. They can lean on this group to move people in the running game. And in particular, I'm curious how it plays out statistically, because they were a good run blocking unit overall last season. They set up David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert with some pretty good opportunities. But there's an interesting thing about trying to measure run blocking as sort of like a stat or something we can look at, because right now, with Pro Football Focus and other places, they've got the yards after contact stat. Once the ball carrier is touched by a defensive player, how many yards do they get after that? Because you'd think then once they're touched by a defensive player, then everything the back is doing from then on is sort of their own work, right? If the defensive player has gotten to them and not brought them down, then it's the running back's credit for having not been brought down. And so then what he creates after that contact is sort of his own work, because the offensive line didn't stop that defender specifically from getting to the ball carrier. So anything he creates after that is his. And the idea is then that yards before contact is that the offensive line is helping keep the running back from being contacted. So they get more of the credit for yards before contact, and running backs get more of the credit for yards after contact. But I also think that's not universally true. I was specific to say more of the credit, not all of the credit, because I think so often we say yards before contact equals all credit to the offensive line, yards before contact equals all credit to the running back. But if that were the case, then you would think last season David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert would have pretty similar yards before contact, and that the differentiator would be yards after contact. But in fact, Khalil Herbert averaged a full yard more before contact than David Montgomery. And sometimes how the running back sets up his blockers and the cuts he decides to make can determine how many yards before contact he gets, as opposed to just purely how well the offensive line blocked up the play. It's not like they blocked better for David Montgomery, better for Khalil Herbert and blocked worse for David Montgomery. I mean, they blocked as best they could on every play, but Herbert got more yards before and more yards after contact because of how he could set up his blocks and how fast he was and his efficiencies as a running back. And so I'm curious to see how that translates with Dante Foreman and with Khalil Herbert. And if we look year after year, compare the yards before contact last year to this year with Herbert and perhaps with Foreman, if we'll see some of those similar trends continue with this offensive line. But I think regardless, you're going to see an improvement with Mustipher out and Nate Davis in. And I think with Riley Reif to Darnell Wright, it wasn't purely Riley Reif all season. There was some injury there and some rotation there. So perhaps the stability of just having the same player, because Wright's going to have his ups and downs. He's not a well-refined prospect just yet. He's got some technical issues he needs to work on, and he's not going to be in his prime, at his peak, his first season. There's going to be some mistakes. There's going to be a learning curve there. There's going to be some ups and downs, and maybe sometimes when we're frustrated. But I think that's more likely to happen in pass protection than it is in the running game. And so that's why I feel like this run blocking is going to be even better than it was last season, because you only lost your weakest links in that area, and you added players that are strong in that area. Pass protection will still be interesting because of Darnell Wright needing to grow and improve in that area, Braxton Jones needing to grow and improve in that area. We'll see how Cody Whitehair does moving back to center, because at times he struggled in pass protection in past years at center, new position for Tevin Jenkins. But also the other point here is that just like how running backs have an influence on their run blocking, quarterbacks have an influence on their pass blocking, and how Justin Fields adapts his pocket presence, how long he holds onto the ball, how quickly he gets out of the pocket, how inclined he is to throw the ball away or to just throw it to a receiver more quickly, will also impact then the statistics you see in the offensive line in terms of pressures and sacks. And some of those are a reflection of what the quarterback does just as much as a reflection of what the offensive line does. And so while we might have pass protection questions about the offensive line, some of that goes on Justin Fields as well. And if Fields can be better in that area individually, in part because his wide receivers are better, so we can get rid of the ball more quickly, and just with more experience with him working behind the offensive line in this system, that can make the offensive line better as a whole. And it's one of the ways that improving the weapons can also improve the pass protection if the time to throw ends up being sped up for Justin Fields, because he's got better weapons that get open more quickly, then the pass protection can be better as a result of all of that as well. So you can see how these Bears improvements have that ripple effect where it's, yes, they got better at wide receiver. We know that, but that improvement at wide receiver can improve a lot for Fields and can improve the offensive line. And yes, we know the Bears invested a lot at linebacker and invested a lot of capital at defensive tackle, but what does that mean? Well, that's how it improves the running game, right? That's what I want to sort of go the next step deeper, besides, yes, not just here's the positions they got better, but how those positional improvements actually make the team better. And I hope you get a more holistic understanding of where we should expect improvement from this Bears team in 2023. I hope you enjoyed kind of going through this process and getting a better sense of where this team is headed this offseason, what we need to look for heading into the preseason and the regular season. I hope then you'll hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We're coming to you 5 days a week. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day, because we are the Locked On Podcast Network. That means it's your team every day, and we love our everydayers. We're tuning in 5 days a week, because if you're an everydayer, you'll be the first to notice today a brand new graphics package for us here in the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. But the people that don't listen every day won't realize it was new when they come back tomorrow, and won't realize that, oh, hey, I didn't listen to Wednesday's podcast, so I didn't see the new graphics until I tuned in on Thursday or Friday or whenever they tune in again, because they're not an everydayer. But you everydayers who tuned in today, who tuned in yesterday, and tune in 5 days a week, you get to see the fun new bells and whistles. We'll have more bells and whistles coming for you throughout the offseason, but this new package feels cool, feels professional, feels nice. And I appreciate our graphics team here at the Locked On Podcast Network helping us out there. And of course, I hope this podcast helps you out with your daily Bears fix and your next opportunity to bear down.